Hello, this is Witch Nikki, and I'm back to read another chapter or two from my brother's book, The Last Summer of World War II by Steve Tryk. And if you have not seen part 1 and part 2, stop now and go listen to those first. It's just been kind of one of those days where it's been pretty hot out there today. Oh, it's been hotter, but I was just out in it, so I'm kind of waiting for it to cool up a little bit. Okay, so this is my brother, and for many years he wore one of these Stinson, I believe they're called Stinson cowboy hats. He always had one on, and denim, usually jeans. There was times where he wore cutoffs or just jean shorts, and Hawaiian print shirt. He was very colorful, and he played a harmonica, as I've mentioned before. I don't know how to play the harmonica, but I have one that he gave me. It's just a little one. Hold on. So this here is a harmonica for those who might not know. And it says blues band. And so this is what it sounds like. You can blow out and you can blow in. That much I know. Here's blowing out. And here's blowing in. See? Sometimes I just play it, anything. She got her dog slobber. Oh, goodness. All right. Oh, just lost the page, but I kind of remember. I remember which one it was on. We read, oh, I feel like I should just start over almost, but this is life, right? And this is how it goes. So, the part I'm going to read here, this is where I had the marker. Because I finished with talking about the M&Ms, that they meant military meals. I've heard that before I read this book. So I read it in another book. So it must have some truth to it. I don't know. Or it's maybe one of those old army tells that I don't know. The name of this chapter is The Fourth Year at Dana Strand Village. I'm going to have to look. I kind of know a little bit about where that was, but I'm going to have to look on a Google map, and maybe y'all could look up for it. Dana, D-A-N-A, Strand Village. It might not even be called that anymore. I don't know. I'm going to take a look, though. It's got me curious. Saturday, May 5th, 1945. Top movies: God is My Co-Pilot, starring Dennis Morgan, Raymond Macy, and Alan Hale. The Man's Navy, starring Wallace Berry. Headlines: All but one Nazi army surrenders. Germans continue fighting against Reds. Hitler body still missing. Wholesale surrender nearly all the Western Front. I'm going to hold it off to here, or if I just hold it here, it just his picture there. But this is what I'm reading. So Saturday, May 5th, 4 years later, and what would be the last summer of World War II, and the summer of a young boy would open his eyes to his new autonomy, away from his mother, able to roam about the neighborhood, free to learn to make mistakes and to meet his world head on, able to confront the unknown. He will learn honor, courage, and respect. He would embark on new quests and would wage his own private war with a beast on the hill outside his window. Hundreds of families were living in project housing. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had hurriedly slapped up to house servicemen, men's wives, and also to house the vast number of transplanted Midwestern women who would work in aircraft plants or at the Navy shipyards. Now, a lot of this stuff that he's talking about was just when he was a little boy, or even kind of beyond that. He was just a little fella. But I'm pretty sure my mom told him a lot of this stuff, and he did read up on it. But he kind of mixed it in with his own. When I finish, I'm going to try to remember to tell you a story about him and my other brother. So, the one-bedroom apartments had only a shower and one front door, 2 windows, one in the front and one in the rear bedroom. They were furnished army cots for beds, a stove and an ice box. Refrigerators? Well, refrigerators were a thing of the future. They had like an ice box, and that's really what it was. It was a box, and you put ice, a chunk of ice, into it to help keep that box inside cool. Sorry. Sergeant Payne had been shipped out in early 1942, just after Pearl Harbor was attacked, to do our tour of island hopping in the South Pacific, minus his bulge for a rifle. Most of Dana Strand Village was, except for a few draft dodgers, mostly wives and servicemen. Jenny would one day say the ratio was over 100 to 1 women to men in the village. The village was situated in a valley at the base of the Palos Verdes Peninsula. A little to the southeast was Gaffey Street. Yeah, I kind of know where Gaffey Street is, which meandered into the town of San Pedro, 3 miles from the village. To the west was a large cattle ranch, bordered by acres of cornfield. Also to the south was San Pedro Naval Shipyard, which employed most of the village residents. By now, Mrs. Payne had 3 mouths to feed. She had Sandy when she was 16, and she had Steve when she was 18, and she had his brother Butch when she was 104. 104 years old. Okay. This must be true, 'cause Steve asked her once, "Mom, how old are you?" She looked down at her son, then up at the ceiling, drew a long pause, and sighed. "Well, since you've been born, I've aged 100 years. So I'm 104 years old." Sounds like something my mom would say. Although Butch was born after Steve, Butch would be the designated older brother unless Steve was trying to teach him to tie his shoes, or they were fighting, or Steve was trying to teach him to count. Butch would be trying to keep his older, more adventurous brother out of trouble simply by tagging along. Jenny would say, "Go with him, Butch, and try to keep him out of trouble." Butch grew up to be one of the kindest, knowledgeable guys that I've ever known, and very nice man. If Butch were any good at his job, this book might not have been written. Looking back into those days during the last summer of World War II, while living in the village, Steve would recall from his past several memories, such as the youth had a best friend most people referred to as the whittler. The old man sat on an oak barrel with a cushion and whittled and told stories to the young lad. Time and again, the whittler conversed with Steve in the early morning sun before finally reaching into a vest pocket and pulling out a watch, telling him it was time to head home. That's kind of interesting, because my brother, one year in 2015, he bought me a pocket watch with a train on it. I still have it. Another memory was old lady Black. Later, Steve would recall the echoing words his mother would say. "You stay away from her, hear me?" Jenny would say, with pursed lips accented by a stern look. Sorry, this book was not edited properly, so I've got to try to do the editing on the wing there, on the go. "Don't you ever go there." She would wag her fingers at and look at the inquisitive lad. Then there was a glare in her eyes. Her probing son would always get kind of nervous curiosity while walking past the matron's apartment. At times he would hear the wailing from within. Old Lady Black always wore a floor-length all-black gown with a wide-brimmed hat and a black veil that hung down over her face, allowing no one to clearly see what she looked like. Our juvenile gentleman friend would also remember how thin and the chalkboard walls were that separated his family's one-room apartment from Mrs. B's apartment next door. They were thin and had no insulation and were unable to hold back any late-night noises. Miss B was a thin-framed teenage mother with glowing ebony skin. She gained everyone's respect with her honesty blended with integrity and sense of fairness. Because our young lad's pillow was only inches away from Miss B's, who lay on the opposite side of the wall in the dead of night, The curious lad would hear the wrenching sounds Mrs. B made with some sailor or merchant marine would come by calling to recompense her with a visit. It sounded to Steve like she was being hurt. This is so like my brother to bring up something like this, which I totally forgot was in here, but here we go. Here we go. At times, the youth wanted to go next door and shout at whoever was hurting Miss B and make him quit hurting her. Then there were always the early Saturday morning get-togethers when neighboring women would collect in Jenny's kitchen and talk about their work or the war with Japan. They'd share news of some distant or local battle or movie or dance. Anyone who lived there could still recall nervous women hugging each other when a certain man with white gloves paid any of them a visit. Back in the old days, they used to get messages from people in white gloves. It would be uniform men that would come and tell them bad news about their husbands or sons or whoever they had in the army. The visit was from a Navy lieutenant stationed at Long Beach Naval Shipyard. If he was coming, it would usually between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. He'd be clad in his Navy officer's dress blues, and he'd be wearing those white gloves clutched tightly around a Western Union telegram. Okay, so he's explaining it. Between those hours, all the wives and mothers in Dana Strand village would stand by half-drawn curtains and wait anxiously. Waiting to exhale. No one ever wanted to see the stranger standing at their door. It's believable that if a woman wrung her hands hard enough while the Navy officer was passing, the farther back they could push the inevitable, and he would keep walking by. Of all the memories young Steve fought with, two were the most vivid. One was that of his mother, who refused to smile since Leon. Why does sometimes he call him Leon? The other time he calls him Loftus. I don't know, but Leon. Her Army sergeant husband had gone off to fight in the Pacific. Steve soon discovered in the order to make his mother smile again, in order to make his mother smile again, he'd have to bring his father home. The second and most crucial memory from those days was that of a hideous, frightening creature that lived alone in the meadow high atop the densely weeded hill outside Steve's bedroom window. This creature was always up there eating and bobbing his head down into the tall grass and disappearing. Then it would slowly reemerge from the tall grass, beckoning to our young soon-to-be boy warrior, taunting him, "Come up here if you dare." The frightened youth would someday confront and fight this abysmal, hideous creature. One day, but not today. Today, our young protector of the village would be kept in because it was raining. He'd be staying indoors with his mom, Butch, and Sandy. On this particular Saturday, it must have been Saturday because neighboring wives and close friends were starting to come into the apartment holding newspapers over their heads to keep the rain damage to a minimal. and also to read about the latest battles in the South Pacific. The early morning gathering was almost a religious ritual. The assembly of friends on Saturdays was a good time to barter and trade butter for sugar, coffee for cigarettes, or trade hand-me-down clothing for the children. Sounds familiar, does it? Only then they weren't called garage sales because no money changed hands. It was just helping each other out. Next on the agenda, an elderly lady with white hair would bring over a coffee pot with cookies, and someone else would bring a Philco radio to add to the buzzing and chatter. Gladys, with her black curly hair and large horn-rimmed glasses, brought the mahogany tabletop radio. Oh, yes, just listen to the voices from the wooden box, laughing and singing, and news of the war. From this, our young men would learn words such as fleet, battles, Guam, Okinawa, Leyte, and MacArthur. If I pronounce Leyte, sorry. If Jenny could entice the owner of the radio to have another cup of coffee or two and stay a little longer, that would be fine for our boy. Also, there were Saturday evenings when various neighbors would have dances. There'd be live music since records and recorders were at a premium and affordable to the more well-off. For the most part, guitars, banjos, and fiddles were what the less fortunate used for music and dancing. Isn't that something? Nowadays, everybody clamors to see live music. Dances were always crowded and smoke-filled since the apartments were so small. All the children were herded into the back bedroom, thus there were no need to hire a babysitter. Sneaking a peek at the festivities from behind a partially open door was the children's entertainment before going to sleep. Then, after the dance, there came that cold, brisk night walk across the courtyard to their own apartment and beds. Morning would find Steve staring out the window at the chilling beast, still there, still grazing, head disappearing into the tall orchard grass mixed with rye, wheat, and timothy. In the summer, blades of grass would tower shoulder high to a grown man and certainly way above young Steve's head. But today it was green and only up to the lad's knees. The springtime made everything grow fast and green, and in time the sharply bladed reeds on the hill and in the meadow would almost conceal the creature. What do you think that creature is? Well, I've gone on to about, that chapter was a little bit longer than the other ones, and they are a little bit longer. So, I'm not sure what house they lived in at the time. I don't think it was this one, but because my mom kind of lived around, and I actually heard a different story about Leon Payne, or Sergeant Payne, as he's being called in this book. Quite different, but I don't want to ruin it. I'll read along and see if maybe it comes up in maybe something that I wasn't told. Maybe later on will be told, later on. I don't know. But my brother Steve was very adventurous, as you'll see, and as you've heard, he's just up to all kinds of tomfoolery. Well, when my mom worked, him and Loftus, or Butch, he was called Butch back in those days. They would bring out a mattress and a couch, and they'd climb up on top of the house and jump onto it, and only to get in a lot of trouble from my mom. She wasn't happy about what happened. If you think nobody's watching, they are. They say it takes a village to raise kids. Well, it does. And even when I was a kid, back in those days when I was a kid, in the 50s and 60s, if you did something and you thought you were scot-free doing it, you better think again, because the neighbors would tell your mom when she get back home. Not that I did anything wrong. I was not like that at all. I wish I knew how to play this so I could play a little song. I'm going to try to learn. Now I woke up Ruby. She come over here to investigate again. Maybe I could find a place. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ruby's getting mad at me. She's like, so, if you have not found this book yet, I'm sure you could still find a few in all different kind of book places online. I think it's best, though, if you want to save a few bucks, just let me read it here. Because I'm telling you, I don't think it was too much my brother's fault, but I don't think there was an editor. And so this made me think about the book I'm writing right now is a different kind of book than my first published book. And I'm going to have to go over carefully and do some editing myself to make sure. Okay, so it's almost a half an hour gone on by, and I'll read some more next time. The Last Summer of World War II by Steve Tryk, read by me.